Merry meet and welcome to Soulful Sunday here at Ariel's Corner. This is Ariel Gatoga and we are streaming live on YouTube. Moderating today are the lovely Jason and the lovely Heather. Thank you so much, moderators. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. I hope you're having a fabulous Sunday. Just a couple announcements real quick and then we'll get right into our stream. There is no premiere today. I have to get right to work right after this stream, so I don't have time for a premiere. But I do have a video ready to go, so I think I'll probably try to premiere that tomorrow. And that's going to be a video on the tarot pips, which we recorded a long time ago, and I just never got around to editing it. So look for that probably tomorrow. Our website is at arielscorner.com, arielscorner.com. And that's where you can find all of our freebies. And everything here is a freebie, except for the merch. The merch isn't free, but you don't need merch to practice anything that we teach here. So we have free courses, free booklets, free guided meditations. And we should look for a new guided meditation coming up. I believe that should be up coming this Wednesday too. And that's going to be a meditation on the Shekinah. What else do we have? Free lectures, free courses, so a lot of stuff there. So check it out, arielscorner.com, arielscorner.com. Our podcast hub, if you want things a little bit more orderly, is located at arielspodcasts.com, arielspodcasts.com. And some people find it easier to navigate that site versus the playlists on YouTube. So, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Let's see, what else is there? Oh yeah, we do have a merch shop, and that's at arielscornershop.com, arielscornershop.com. And I finally finished with the migration to the new email service, and so we're warming up that domain again. So there's not a ton of emails going out yet. It'll probably take another 2 or 3 weeks, and then you'll start getting your updates about things like, premieres and things like that. I'm not using it in its full capacity yet, because sometimes when you have it's not a new domain, but it's a new server on an old domain, a new service on an old domain. You don't want the email gods to all of a sudden throw everything into spam. So we're taking it slowly. But anyway, but my main work is done on that, so I can focus on other things. And one of the things I will be focusing on this week is we will be getting some new merchandise. Is that it? I think that's it. Okay, so we do have a chat thread, so please chat amongst yourselves. If you do have a question, you can put it in the chat thread, and provided I'm not going over, I will take that. We'll take questions before we end the stream. If I don't have time, take your questions onto the Discord server or the private Facebook group. You can find links for both of those on our main website, arielscorner.com. arielscorner.com, on the header and the footer of every page. On the footer of every page, we also have a donation link if you feel like supporting this channel. Another way to donate to Ariel's Corner, in addition to right on our website, is through the PayPal portal. That's paypal.me/Ariel Gatoga. And also on YouTube, you could use a super sticker, super chat, or super thanks. We do appreciate your support. And mostly what we appreciate is that you're here. So let's get going. If you are in a place where it is safe and appropriate, please close your eyes and begin to take some nice, long, slow, deep, relaxing breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. With every inhale, feel more peace and light entering the body and mind. And with every exhale, let go of the tension in your body, along with anything in your mind you do not want. Inhaling peace and exhaling as you let go. We picture ourselves on top of a beautiful mountain in the center of a circular grove of trees. In the center of our circle, a bonfire blazes forth, and it lights us and the grove with a sacred golden light. This is the light of perfect love and perfect trust. It burns away gently and efficiently everything that is unlike itself, leaving us safe and serene. Into our sacred space, we invoke the presence of our Creator. To many of us, our Creator reveals themselves to be a mother and father, a goddess and God. We also call upon our angels, guides, and teachers. We ask that we be guided as we walk upon the way, becoming happier, more peaceful, more gentle, wiser, more powerful, and more loving people. Blessed be. Let's say that again. There are so many facets to the wonderful world of witchcraft. And every witch will practice in his or her own way. And that's beautiful. That's the beauty of the craft. And that's why we say no one person can speak for the craft, because it's too big. There's not one personality that can have all of the craft in its perspective and understanding. Because so many times there seem to be aspects of the craft that contradict one another. And that's only true if you're trying to look at the craft as a whole, as like a cohesive system. And it is a cohesive system from its perspective, but from the perspective of the different people practicing it, it's never going to feel cohesive, because you have to take things system by system. There's all kinds of life on Earth. There's trees, there are jellyfish, there are human beings, there are wolves, there are amoeba, there are bacteria. But to impose the same structures and rules of order upon each and every life form wouldn't work, because they each have their own way. They each have their own individual, unique way that they have to exist in order to be a part of the entirety of the ecosystem. So from the ecosystem's perspective, everything fits together perfectly. But if you're trying to see, well, I don't understand, this operates so differently than that, and this operates so differently than that. There's predators, there's prey, I don't understand. It's because from the perspective of each individual system within a larger ecosystem, things are a certain way. But those things aren't the same certain way when you come from a different perspective, from a different part of that ecosystem. So all of that to say that within the craft, you're going to find different ways that work. And also within the craft, you're going to find a lot of BS. You're going to find so much nonsense that doesn't work for anybody, ever. And a lot of that is based on superstition. We have a lot of talks on why I'm not fond of superstition as a method, as a methodology of working working magic. But even they have their place. And my recommendation to you is to take the same attitude that I have and to let people be. Let people do their thing. Live and let live. And people will eventually figure it out for themselves. And if they don't, they don't. And that's really not, it's really not our problem. It's really not our responsibility to police the craft. And that's why you'll hear me tell you again and again, you'll hear me say again and again, there are no witch police. There are people who try to be witch policed, that try to be witch police, but they haven't been sanctioned by the craft as a whole. The craft's one and only law is do what you will. And it takes care of itself. It takes care of itself. It's amazing how it takes care of itself. The craft has no problem surviving all on its own without our help. So the best thing that we can do is follow our own heart and our own understanding and find a system that we like or that we are interested in and train in that system so that we get the best possible methodology that we can find in any moment and train along those lines so that we can become powerful in our craft and then branch out as we will. That's my recommendation. The reason I bring all of this up is because you're going to hear different ideas regarding some of the things that I want to talk about today. And so I just want to preface everything by saying this is just my perspective. And we can say that generally about Ariel's Corner. Ariel's Corner is a school. It is. It does function as a school. There are courses, there are lessons, there are all of that. But I'm just teaching you my way of doing things. That's why it's Ariel's Corner. It's not the witch's corner. It's just my way of doing things. It's my perspective. It's how I practice, different aspects of my historical practice in the craft, even though I don't always work each and every system I teach all the time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have time to even, have a meal. But all of these things are just sharing with you what I do and what works for me. So I think it's important to preface that, to preface our discussion with all of that so you understand that I'm not here to present you with new dogma to follow. All right. So having said that, there are those of you who have taken a witch's primer notice that I start out of the gate. I start with spiritual practice. Not spellcasting, spiritual practice. We learn how to consecrate our food as a spiritual practice. We learn how to purify our energy body through different means as a spiritual practice. And then as you move on in that training, your spiritual practice is deepened with things like grounding and centering, protection, trance, meditation, etc. Then you learn how to cast a circle, and then you learn things like spellcasting. So spiritual practice is one part of the craft. Another part of the craft is magic as spellcasting. And when we talk about spellcasting, from the way that I teach it, almost all spell casting involves creating a specific thought form according to your desire, according to your will. And there's all kinds of theory that we incorporate, as well as techniques that we can incorporate in order that that thought form be built solidly and effectively, efficiently to bring about a specific result. And so a spell is a type of imposition of one's will upon a situation. And when we hear that, we think, oh, isn't that manipulative? Well, yeah, it is. I am manipulating my life. I have every right to manipulate my life. I don't have a right to necessarily manipulate other people, but I have a right to manipulate my life. If I want more money, I have every right to have that. If I feel unsafe, I have every right to manipulate my environment so that I have protection. I have, and so do you, every right to manipulate. I have every right along with, I can't talk today. I have every right, as do you, to manipulate my life in any way I desire. So then on another side of spell casting, and the one that people seem to get hung up on the most, is casting spells on other people, manipulating them. How can I get them to love me? How can I get them to leave me alone? How can I get them to do this, that, or the other thing? And for the most part, not entirely and not always, but for the most part, I don't involve myself with either doing that or teaching that. My will does not belong being imposed. My will is not to be imposed upon other people's freedom. Now, there are some caveats to that. If somebody is bullying me, if somebody is a danger to me, I do have every right to protect myself and to manipulate their behavior insofar as it thwarts my freedom or my will. So there is that. I do have every right to manipulate you to the degree that you are thwarting my will or my freedom or making me unsafe for any reason. Now, then there's also the concept of cursing, which is a very deep concept, and it's actually a type of spiritual practice that we talk about in many other lectures, so I don't want to go too deeply into that today, but that is a valid type of magic that many people who call themselves witches say, no, you can never do that, or you should never do that. Or on the flip side of it, they're so casual about it, and they think it's funny, and there's memes about cursing people, so I don't fall in either of those schools of thought. I find that cursing is a valid practice, and it's a very serious practice, and it's not one that's to be taken lightly, nor to be joked about, at least not for me. You're not going to find me doing too much joking about hexing people or cursing people. Nor are you going to really find me hexing or cursing people too often. But like I said, it does have its place, and you can look up all of the different lectures that I have on cursing, because there's several. Then there's blessing. Witches bless, hence the term blessed be. And a witch's blessing is a very powerful thing. If you've really become powerful in focusing all of your energies, training yourselves, all of yourselves, in a way, training yourself to have all of those different energy bodies strong and balanced and focused on a particular thing. Even a blessing that doesn't have necessarily a spell attached to it is going to be a powerful thing. So mostly today, what I would like to focus on is the difference between a spell and blessing. when you cast a spell, like I said before, you have a very specific goal in mind, albeit that very frequently we will call upon our higher mind, our superconscious or deity, spirits, etc., to tweak those desires for us and say this or something even better, that kind of thing. But it's still up to us to have a very specific thought form and impose our will upon a situation. Whereas if you're blessing somebody, you're not imposing your will upon them. You're not saying, I bless you, therefore you should do this, or therefore you will have that. You're just blessing them. And, well, I shouldn't say just blessing them, but you're blessing them, not casting a spell on them. And for a blessing to be its most powerful, it really needs to be indiscriminate, at least in my practice. I don't bless you because I think you deserve it, because then all of a sudden there's a manipulation involved. If I think you deserve my blessing, then somehow my blessing has more than just blessing attached to it. It's got an ulterior motive, and that's sneakily coming into the category of spell casting on some level or another. But if I'm blessing you just because you're in front of me, just because you cross my mind, just because maybe even if I see you in need, or if I don't see you in need, if I see you happy and prosperous, that also deserves my blessing. My training when it comes to blessing is that I don't have a judgment on who deserves my blessing and who doesn't. I don't have that. I mean, I do, but I train myself not to. I train myself out of that, because the ego doesn't really bless, but it thinks it does, and it convinces us that it does. But an ego's blessing is so full of caveat. There's caveat here, caveat there, condition here, condition there. Whereas I want true blessing when I give it. And a true blessing is unconditional. A true blessing is spontaneous. It has no strings attached. Think about a gift. When you give somebody a gift, if there's strings attached to it, you can't truly and honestly call it a gift. It's a tool of manipulation. But if you give somebody something freely, there's no strings attached to it. You hope they love it. You want them to love it. If you hear how much they loved it, that'll make you feel good. But if they don't love it, it's okay. They don't have to. You give them the gift, and if they have to re-gift it, they don't like it, or if they don't use it, that's fine. That's on them, because it's theirs, because you gave it to them. But if you give somebody, like you give somebody a shirt, and every time you see them, you say, well, why aren't you wearing that shirt I gave you? That's not a real gift. You gave them something because you wanted some sort of personal satisfaction of them proving to you that they enjoyed your gift, right? But when you give something, if it's a true gift, it's not yours anymore. You've given it away, and you're freed from it. It's theirs now. You're detached from the whole thing. And that's what a blessing needs to be. A blessing needs to be a freely given gift. It's a gift that's given freely with no strings attached, and you don't follow up on it. You don't do anything other than give it. And when you do that, that blessing is so powerful. And it's up to the person, obviously, whether or not they accept the blessing, whether or not they allow it to be something that makes a positive difference in their lives. But you can't undo the fact that they've been blessed by you. So if you've given that blessing without any strings attached, and you've given it freely from your heart, something good will come from it, one way or another. And if the only good that comes from it is to you, so be it. That's on them. right? If they don't fully receive it, if they don't do anything with it, that's okay, because it's still been good for you. It's still, that blessing still, it's interesting because we say what we give returns to us. It feels like a boomerang. And by the time it comes back to us, it has increased. But it's not that it really boomerangs. It just appears that way. It's a good image. It's just that by the time it manifests again for us, it has expanded. But it never really left us in the first place because it has nowhere to go, because it's all in the mind. So it can't go anywhere. There's no distance for it to travel. So when you give something, it does return to you multiplied in that by the time it manifests in any way in your life, it's been growing, because it's the nature of the mind to expand and to grow. So when you give a blessing to someone, you can't help but blessing yourself. That's what ultimately all blessing is, self-blessing. And it's an interesting tool to use. Somebody asked me the other day, how can I forgive somebody that's been so bad? How is that possible? And it's possible by doing it. It's possible by doing it. The reason why it's possible to do that is because you get to the point where you're not thinking about whether or not they deserve your blessing. It's not about you proving yourself to me that I give you my blessing. And why would that be something that's important? Well, on one hand, that's already the relationship that the infinite has with you. The infinite's constantly blessing you, constantly loving you, regardless of what you've done. If it was based on you deserving the blessing because of your behavior or your thoughts or your attitudes and things like that while you're here, you would probably not get so much blessing. Isn't that true? I mean, well, maybe you're better than me, but if I tallied up all of the bad things that I've thought about people, and the anger that I've had towards people, and the resentment that I've had towards people, and that kind of thing, and the infinite's blessing of me was dependent on those kinds of things, I don't think I'd get that much blessing. But my understanding and my experience of the infinite is that blessing comes to me anyway. That's called grace. Grace is something that I receive from the infinite constantly just because of who I am. It has nothing to do with my deservingness of it in this lifetime. Because the ego mind of this lifetime, my personality, my body, all of that the storyline is very ego-driven here. And if it's up to the ego to make me deserving or not deserving of the blessings of the infinite, then I'm screwed. But the infinite doesn't see me as an ego. The infinite sees me as I am, as I was created. When I can do that for other people, when I can say I am willing to bless them regardless of their ego, regardless of what I think of them, I'm just indiscriminate with my blessing. When I can do that, then I start to operate on the same level as my soul. Because my soul and the Creator are the same creature, are the same fabric, the same type of being. The ego's not. The ego's a construct. The ego's a false reality, a false identity, a false world, a false everything. And if you really want to break out of this ego-based world, and people say, I don't want to live in this world of illusion anymore, well, that's a good thing to want, not to want to live in the illusion. But how can you do that? Well, you have to start identifying with yourself as you exist outside of the illusion. That means that you start to identify with yourself as a soul, not as an ego. Well, the only way to do that is to act like one. And you do and your soul operates in the same manner as the Creator. The Creator extends love and it becomes you. And then what you do is you extend love. You extend love out, and those are your creations. And you won't be able to understand how you can create, none of us will, on that level, until you are able to do it within the illusion first. And so the only way out of the illusion is to extend blessing indiscriminately to anybody and everybody you think of, you see. Just it becomes a habit. And it's so funny when you tell people about this, because the first response is always like, well, you can't live life like that. If you start just blessing indiscriminately, then you're not going to protect yourself. You're going to be a mark for people. You're not going to be able to know when somebody's a danger to you. All you're doing is dispensing blessings to people that don't deserve it. You put yourself in a very vulnerable position. And it's interesting because those kinds of reactions are from people that have never done this, or that have never experienced life as a blessing machine. And if you give yourself, it's sometimes the best way to deal with the illusions and the ego is to schedule stuff. We may not ever get to the point, well, we probably will, but it's hard to get to the point where we remember to do things like that when we're involved in the drama of the day-to-day world. But if you schedule it, if you schedule your meditation, if you schedule your spiritual practice, if you schedule time for blessing people, if you schedule it, if it's part of your routine, then it gets taken care of. I was talking to somebody the other day about that. It's just like, I can't ever remember while I'm going about my day, I can't ever remember to think of these things. I'm always being constantly driven by my ego. And my response is, that's fine. Because if you have a spiritual practice, it's only going to be that way until the next scheduled meditation. You're fine. Don't worry about it. Little by little, you'll wake up in the middle of the dream. But for the time being, just schedule your meditation every morning. Just schedule your spiritual practice, your aura cleansing, whatever you're doing. Then you never have to worry about it. So your ego runs amok for 12 hours, but then you have another spiritual practice scheduled. The same thing goes with blessing. If you can't get to the point where you think of yourself as a vehicle of blessing, that's fine. Schedule it. Make it part of your daily routine. Take 5 minutes. I'm going to bless somebody. Whoever happens to cross my mind. No strings attached. Doesn't matter who it is. Whether I like them, don't like them, whether they're important to me, not important to me, completely arbitrary. Whoever happens to cross my mind, I'm going to bless them for a few minutes. And that can just be so-and-so, blessed be. Blessed be so-and-so. I only want all of the blessings of life for you. That's not casting a spell on them, by the way. You're not saying, therefore, I want to see these things happen for you. That's very different. They're akin, it's a type of magic, but you're not casting spells on them. You're not manipulating them. You're not trying to get them to do, be, or have anything. All you're doing is acting like your soul for 5 minutes with this one particular person. Because if you're doing it for one person, you're doing it for everybody. Because the soul understands that there is no separation. That this is just the object of your blessing at this moment. And the next time it'll be somebody else. And if you do that, where you schedule in regular blessing sessions like that, and you keep it simple, easy, and short, so that you have less propensity to avoid doing it, you will notice that as you go about your life, your day-to-day experiences, you do remember to bless people indiscriminately in the moment. no matter what's happening. If there's a problem in your life, if you're having an issue with something or someone, you bless it. You just give it blessings. You're not casting a spell. You're not saying it must be this, it must be that. Very different. That's a whole different operation. It's blessing. Blessed be. Blessed be. Blessed be this. Blessed be that. Blessed be this person. Blessed be that person. Blessed be the photocopier. Blessed be the iPhone. Whatever you're having an interaction with. It's a wonderful thing if you're having a problem, but it's also a wonderful thing if you're not having a problem. You get into the habit of blessing, and you get into the habit of knowing yourself as a soul, functioning in this world in a different way, functioning as an extender of blessing. And when you are functioning as an extender of blessing, guess what can't operate? That's right, the ego. The ego short circuits in the presence of blessing because it can't compute. It doesn't understand that. The ego is based on grievances and separation and reasons and deservingness and all of that. And indiscriminate blessing is not part of its worldview. And so the ego short circuits every time you choose blessing over whatever other option there is. Blessed be always gets you out of the path of the self-destructive tendencies of the ego. It is a panacea in a way, but don't think of it like that, because then it becomes something else. If you think of it as like, oh, this is just my new tool that I'm going to use so that I can manipulate things, that's an ego thought. That's an ego thought. It's important to understand that we're not talking about manipulating people with blessings. We're talking about functioning as a soul within the illusion. Functioning as a soul within the illusion. That's what that character in the New Testament called Jesus in that New Testament meant by being in the world but not of it. We're in the world, but we're not from here. We're from a different world. And that's not a different place. It's not something that is after we die. It's a different understanding. It's a different perception. And you can't get to that different perception until you're functioning within that perception. And the only way to function within that perception is to respond to things in this world differently. And the way to respond to things in this world differently that brings you that new perspective and that new perception is by blessing indiscriminately within the illusion. And sometimes that'll take the form of forgiveness, but not always. So, a lot of people are really hung up on forgiveness. They just think that that's just the worst thing you could possibly do. If I forgive somebody, I'm condoning negative behavior, it's blaming the victim, and yada, yada. And those people understand forgiveness as it's defined by the ego. And from the ego's perspective, that's true. But from the soul's perspective, forgiveness is simply a change in the way you see someone. Instead of seeing them as evil and bad, you see them as ill and in need. And when you see somebody who's ill and in need and you bless them, you're not forcing them to be well, but you are taking a stand that I'm functioning as a soul rather than as an ego in regards to this person. But you can't get to that point until you practice doing it indiscriminately. Because if you start going about trying to, quote, fix your relationships by blessing people, you're not blessing people. You're playing another ego game. So you got to start with indiscriminate blessing. You've got to start, you have to learn how to bless just because. And the only way I've found that ever works for me is by scheduling time every day where I just have a little blessing session to whomever happens to cross my mind, and not pick and choose. I don't care who it is. If it's somebody in the media that it comes to mind, that's who gets my blessing. If it's somebody that I love very much, that's who gets my blessing. If it's somebody I just loathe and can't stand, that's who gets my blessing. I don't have a say. That's my practice to learn how to do this. But when I can do that every day, I notice that I do have that tool available for me in specific situations. And it's usable in those situations because I've learned how to do it and not allow it to be co-opted by the ego. But that's taken practice. And it's just like practicing the piano. It's kind of boring when people want to be great musicians. A lot of them stop wanting to be great musicians when they realize how boring it is. It's just, you got to practice every day, and you got to fix mistakes every single day. And little by little, you get better, but you don't notice you're getting better because it's so slow and so boring. So you don't see how much better you're getting, but your teacher does because they only see you once a week, maybe. Other people that have heard you play before notice after a couple of months, wow, you're really doing well, right? Because you're practicing every day. And then it does get fun because after a while, you are able to play more music that you love, and you are able to do more wonderful things. But that period of time just to get to that point was pretty boring. It took a lot of desire on your part to stick with it. And the same thing goes with anything. It goes with magic, but it also goes with blessing. You're born to bless. That's true. That's your function here. We're all born to bless here, but it takes practice. It takes a practice to get good at it. And ultimately, the idea isn't so much that you're blessing other people so that their lives get better, although they will frequently get better. You're blessing so that you learn how to function as a soul within the illusion, so that you start seeing things differently and that things turn around for you. Everything in magic, ultimately, if it's done right, is done out of self-interest. But self-interest doesn't mean selfishness, because selfishness is usually self-interest at the expense of others. Whereas from the soul's point of view, self-interest means that it's good for everybody. So give it a shot. Start small. Blessed Be is your best friend. Take 3 to 5 minutes a day. Schedule it in, where you bless somebody indiscriminately, whoever happens to cross your mind. If you might be able to get 1 or 2 people in, and then you're done. You can do it once or twice a day, and stick with it for about 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and notice the difference in the way that you see things and people, and notice how much easier it is for you to use that in the moment in a way that's very impactful and powerful, starting to see the world differently. Starting to see the world very differently as your soul rather than as your ego. It's quite powerful stuff. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I so appreciate you. Until next time, blessed be. Oh, my goodness, we have a lot of questions. I can't do candle magic anymore since I'm spending more than seeing results. Witchcraft is expensive. So I'm doing psalm magic. But as a recent atheist, I struggle a bit how to overcome that. Well, for one thing, you don't need to do psalm magic if it's not comfortable for you. Witchcraft doesn't need to be expensive. Not the way I teach it. So I don't know if you've done a witch's primer or not, but if you have, you'll notice in there that we talk about not buying a bunch of stuff unless unless that's something that you enjoy doing. So you can do psalm magic if you want to. And I think, the way to overcome what you're talking about is maybe listening to some of my videos, because I think a lot of atheists like my videos. At least I've been told they do. But another thought is you don't have to do psalm magic. You can do, have you seen, I think I have a video on mental magic, and I also have a meditation that shows you how to cast an entire spell in your mind. And that's called Cast Your Own Spell. So yeah, you don't need to spend money to do magic, not at all. Where does the phrase blessed be come from? Is this old or new? Well, it's pretty biblical. It's in the Bible quite a bit. But if it predates the Bible, I don't know. And I don't know where it came as far as the craft thing. It may have even started with Gerald Gardner. I don't know. All I do know is that it's a wonderful tool that I've learned how to use. But if you don't like the phrase blessed be, you can still bless. You don't need to use that phrase. You can still bless. Bless you so-and-so. Bless you so-and-so. Is it okay to bless indiscriminately? That's what I just talked about. Yes, you must bless indiscriminately if you're going to get any good at it. Ariel Gatoga, I make art that deals with themes that relate to my life. Should I be concerned this could interfere with gestation of thought forms I've previously cast on those topics? That's a really good question. I don't think so. I don't think that that's something that you should worry about, because all good artists, when they put out a piece of art or music or something like that, will go back years later and say, I really think that's a wonderful piece of art, although it has nothing to do with me anymore. I'm a very different person than I was back then. And you have to learn as an artist to be objective about that and not worry so much that I can't put this art out because what happens if later I don't relate to that anymore? Is that going to undo all my thought forms? I don't think so. Especially if you're very clear about that in your mind, that my artwork is a snapshot of what I was putting out at that time in my life, whereas my thought forms are something that is alive right now. So it's a great question. I love that. Will I think this way and do these things all my life? Then what? When will I change? Well, that's a problem right there. When will I change? If you're doing these things now, then you change as it goes. How does the piano player change? By practicing every day. Do they notice they've changed? Not usually. Not until they look back. It's so slow. You don't notice that your kid is growing either until you recognize that they don't fit into the clothes anymore. But other people notice it. If they've been gone a week and they're like, whoa, they've grown in a week. Oh, have they? Right? So you will change based on the fact that you're doing new things. But if you're doing it in order for you to change and you have this kind of if you're leaning on yourself, when am I going to see it? When am I going to see it? When am I going to see it? It's the same. That's the same problem as when we have a spell that we cast. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? That's poison to a thought form. So you have to learn how to let go of that and do it for its own sake. As far as the blessing goes, just do it for its own sake for a while. Just like you have to practice your scales for their own sake. You'll get a lot more done if you're just very present practicing your scales versus, well, I'm going to practice these so that I can play this hard piece. Then you're not really practicing your scales anymore. You're not building that skill, right? So you have to be willing to be where you are. It's a great question. I've been practicing the praise of the infinite, and although I know it works, I don't feel like my heart is fully able to be convinced when things feel rough. Is that still fine? Of course it is. Of course it is. Your ego's always going to throw things at you to say, see? It's just how it is. And you have to learn over time to almost laugh at it. Or to out loud laugh at it. I do that all the time. I'll start saying, yeah, but I can't. And then I listen to myself and I say, ugh, there it goes again. There goes my ego trying to throw me off track. Of course it's making a difference in your life. Thank you. How do I get out of a mental prison? Well, who put you in the mental prison? Who's the jailer? Who's got the keys? The infinite's will for you is not to be in a mental prison. Your soul's will is not to be in a mental prison. The only part of you that wants you in a mental prison is the false part of you. So you can start by saying, I'm free, and recognize that you're not in a mental prison. You're not in a mental prison. You think you are. You've convinced yourself you are, but notice that you're not. And then doing things like spiritual purification, meditation, orb of light, grounding and centering, all of those things that we teach, plus this idea that we introduced today of indiscriminate blessing, pulls you right out of that idea of mental prison. You recognize I'm not in a mental prison, other than my ego's own making, but my ego's not real. And as a soul, I'm functioning on a different level. So I'm going to change my point of view, at least for a few minutes every day, and practice on experiencing my life as a soul rather than as an ego. And once you see the man behind the curtain, nothing really looks the same. It may take a while for things to work themselves out, but once you recognize that that whole idea of being in prison in your mind is not as real as you thought it was, as soon as you get a glimpse of that, it's so much easier for you to keep going until you completely break through. Great questions today. Oh my gosh. Does our blessing practice need to identify specific individuals? Nothing needs to do anything in the craft. Let's just be really clear about that. These are my tools. These are the suggestions that I give, systems that I've developed for myself over the years. Okay, so you don't have to do anything I say. However, to do what I'm talking about, yes, it does need an object. Because if you're just doing blessing, I just bless the world, bless the universe, that's fine. But unless you have an object of your blessing, like an object of your affection, it's very arbitrary. It doesn't have any effect really on the deep mind. The deep mind doesn't recognize it. It's not real. It doesn't have that staying power. Whereas if you bless a specific person, then you get to confront sometimes why you don't think they deserve it or why you do think they deserve it, and understanding that neither of those things are true. That you're going to bless anyway, regardless of whether they do or they don't. That you're just here to do an exercise. I'm here to bless. And the person I'm blessing is the person that crossed my mind, even though I don't want to. I'm going to do it anyway. And that gives your deep mind a completely different experience than this, bless the universe, I bless everything and everyone, which is nice. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's very different from, I bless this particular person that I can't stand, or this particular person that I put on a pedestal, maybe even. This particular person that I say, we are great friends, and this person that I say, I would never want to know this person because they're just awful. Right? So it's very, very powerful to have an actual object of your blessing, and that it's indiscriminate. There's no rhyme or reason other than the fact that they happen to cross your mind. The first person you think of, that's the best way to do that exercise. The first person that crosses your mind, that's who we're blessing today. No matter how comfortable or uncomfortable that makes you feel, that's the exercise. Great questions. Thank you so, so very much. I appreciate you so much for being here today. I got to get to work. Thank you so much to the amazing moderators. Today we had the lovely Jason, the lovely Heather, and the lovely Dre. So we'll see everybody on Wednesday for Witchy Wednesday, because we're off for a couple days. But do look for probably a video premiere tomorrow, Monday, at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Until next time, blessed be.